This conference will now be
Acharya-Paryantām
recorded.
Vande Guru-Paramparam. Ragadirogan Satatanushaktan Asheshakaya Prasrudan Asheshan Autsukyamoharadidan Jakhana Yopurva Vaidyaya Namostu Tasmai. So it is really a sad news that the good friend of Vachan Samuha, Vaidya Vinod Dombe sir, passed away to his heavenly abode on the last Tuesday. So prayers and heartfelt condolences, and with that words of remembrance, let us start. In our last session, there is one question in the beginning itself from Ashwin. So I think it is related to what we were discussing in our previous session. So I think we will answer that question or go through that question first. Sometimes what we are going to explain today may be answering that question. We do not know. So we will go through that first and then we will come to our today's session. In the last class, I asked about taking Ushna Jala for Sukha Pachana of Sneha in Shodhanartha Snehapana. And also I asked whether the Sneha in the Shodhanartha Snehapana travels with Annarasa. You mentioned that Sneha in this case works more with the Vyavahi property. If that is the case, then this property of Sneha applies in Shamanartha Sneha also. How to understand this? Okay. Yes, I think we will not be seeing the answer for this question in our session today. So I think we should uh, take this case. Shall we look into this case first, Nilesh?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the question is number one, the first part, taking Ushna Jala for Sukha Pachana of Sneha. Yeah, it creates such a sense that Varyushnam Achenu Pibel Snehe Tal Sukha Paktaye. So the word meaning of this line is Acche Snehe Tal Sukha Paktaye Ushnam Vari Anu Pibed. So in Acha Sneha, after taking the Sneha, Anu, Ushnam Vari Pibed, drink Ushna Jala. This is meant for Tal Sukha Paktaye, Pakti Pajanam, for the easy Pajanam of that Sneha. In our previous session, we explained the idea behind Utkleshna Snehapanam. Utkleshna Snehapanam or Shodhananga Snehapanam, Shodhanartha Snehapanam is not meant for Dhadu Poshana. It is not meant for Dhadu Poshana. Its function is to bring about Utkledana, that we will find in a later stage. स्नेहक्लिन्नाः धातुकाः कोष्ठका धातुका वा स्नेहक्लिन्ना. So bringing that klinnavastha, klid, that is what is meant with the ulkleshana snehapanam. It is not for dhatu poshanam. Generally, sneham is meant for poshanam. This is very important. So we should understand that in utkleshana type of snehapana or utkledana type of snehapana or shodhananga snehapana, the sneha is not supposed to get the sort of bhajana which otherwise is achieved by ahara or other type of sneha. That is not the very intention of the procedure itself. And how does an ahara dravya get digested or processed so as to bring dhatu poshana? That is very important. Of course, it may look like a uh, conceptual explanation or theoretical explanation. Well, it is a theoretical explanation. We take it for granted that it is a theoretical explanation. But that theoretical explanation is very important when we come to the actual practice of snehapana. That is very important. Ahara get processed by Agni, and Agni here need not be considered as one single entity, the Pajaka Pitta alone, but it should rather be understood as a system, as a system, and that system as a whole is working in perfect harmony with each components of the system to make sure that the ahara is transformed to such a level that it can become homogeneous with the sharira dhatu, at least in the entry point. That is very important. Ahara and sharira dhatu are not homogeneous that way, not identical, not similar. It requires some sort of a transformation to make it, to bring some sort of a tulyata, samanata, aikarupyata between the dhatu and ahara. That is what the Agni is supposed to do. We have very beautiful uh, shastra for that, for explaining these sort of uh, activities that is happening inside. Annam कालेभ्यवहृदं कोष्ठं प्राणानिलाहृदं तद्द्रवैर्भिन्नसङ्घातं नीदं स्नेहेन मार्दवम् सन्धुक्षितः समानेन पचति आमाशयस्थितम् औदर्योऽग्निर्यथा बाह्यः स्थालीस्थं तोयतण्डुलम्. And we find many explanations further to this statement. Adau shadrasamapyannam, all these things. We have discussed it in our own sessions, I think, earlier. So if that sort of that type of a pajanam is happening to the sneha, what we are going to give with an intention of doing a shodhana chikitsa to a person, you cannot achieve the sort of preparation which is meant for or which is essential for shodhana chikitsa. That is important. So what should you do, or what should we do? We should be able to take this sneha through the srotasas, if that is a plural of srotas in English. Various types of srotas for which rasa is the point of entry, and the rasavaha srotas is the beginning. And it should be left unattended by Agni. If it is attended by Agni, what will happen? Possibility number one, it may get the sort of bhakti pajanam by Agni. Then what will happen? That will give rise to some amount of rasadhatu, which is very rich in snigdha guna, because it is completely derived out of sneha. Then that rasadhatu will start circulating through the parinamam abadhyamananam abhivahini srotas, and that will be used for making various dhadus. Of course, the where there is extreme shortage of sneha, maybe getting a priority in that nourishment sometimes. Then sometimes because of the tulya gunada, the medas may be getting the major share. Sometimes the agni of a particular position, which is stronger than the rest of the principles of Agni, may work more on that particular rasa, which is prabhuda in snigdha guna, and may drag the maximum or the grab the maximum out of it. So this is what we find with various types of nyayas related to ahara bhajanam and dhatu parinamam. So that should not happen, because that is not what our intention is. The very intention of the procedure is to bring about utkleshana. And that utkleshana, this can be there by many means, need not be this one procedure alone. Sometimes as part of certain sampraptis, this sort of utkleshana can happen. When there is very predominant presence of ama in the amashaya, which is getting transferred to the system by the srotas and start circulating amam. We have learned that word amam. Amam is a representation of a stagnant stage. Stagnant stage, not in the sense that it is immovable or static, but in the sense that it is not properly changed or transformed from the previous stage to the next stage, so as to facilitate a proper momentum of the stuffs within. So when there is a predominant and a very excessive presence of amam in the amashayam, then automatically, and when it is a continuous, there can be utkleshana happening within the system. And it is in such cases that we go for shodhana without the so-called snehapana in advance as preparation. तत्रोत्कृष्टे समुत्कृष्टे कभप्राये चले मले सद्य what is that? In Jara we find tatrolkrishte samutklishte kabhapraye chale male sahillasa prasega annadveshakasa vishujige sadyo bhuktasya sanjade jware same visheshatah. Then we go for Vamanam. There is no question of inducing any other type of Ulkleshanam with Snehapanam. So there, some principle which is not attended by the Agni, or some principle in the case of which Agni failed, is getting into the system. But that is a pathological presence of some sort of an undigested material or amam, which can cause a potential amayam. We are trying to do the same thing here also. We are trying to bring about some sort of a this status which will be untouched by the Jadharagni, but still getting into the system and circulates all around and causing some special or delivering some special duties when they come into contact with the concerned dhatu or ashayam or whatever, or srodhas or whatever it is. That particular or that specific duty which it is supposed to do is to work on the doshas which are adhered to the srodhas or to the dhatu or to the ashaya or to the avayava or whatever it is, and loosen it by making it wet, clean up. So which was adhered, such a dosha is known as anutklishtam. To make the anutklishta dosha utklishtam. That is the intention here. So what should we do? We should plan the procedure in such a way that it bypasses the Agni, it avoids an encounter with the Agni, and it get transfused to the system through the Srodhas, get into the system unattended by Agni, and hence unattended by the reflective principles of Agni within the system, known otherwise as Dhatu Agni, but still, because of the closest similarity that the Sneha is having with the Dhatu Sneha, interact with the dhatus, with the srotas, and whatever sneha format is there within the system, and attend the doshas which are adhered there areas and make them utklishtam. This is the story. This is what is supposed to achieve. So when should we do this? It should be done when there is a situation in the agnisthana where Agni is resting. Does Agni rest? Yes, Agni rests. It is a situation which is not so common, but occurring very specifically when that exact or the literal Agni Pachanam is over, but the entire Paga Kriya is not over. So at that point, the Agni as such is not working, but the system is still operational. So what does it mean? Agni Pachanam is over of what? Agni Pachanam of the meal taken earlier, the previous meal. Its Agni Pachanam is over, but the remaining stages of that Pachana Prakriya, like Pajatyannam, then Vibhajade Sarakittau Pruthak, then Vivechayati Munjati. All these things are still continuing. So this is very crucial. This understanding is very crucial. It is at that point of time that we have to feed the system with sneha, acha sneha. It is a sort of attacking. It is a sort of attacking. This is what is actually happening in a properly conducted acha sneha panam for ulkleshna sneha. So it is an attack on the Agni, and it will take some time to come back. So then why should you use the word Tal Sukhapaktaye? You see, because of the peculiarity or the relevance in this particular context, other two types of Snehapana is also explained here. That means the Brahmana Snehapana and the Shamana Snehapana, both of which demands a proper spajana of the sneha in Agni. That needs a proper pajana of sneha in the Agni. So they have, so out of all the three possibilities or three categories which we are basically planning, two of the three, 2/3 requires proper pajanam. Number one. Number two reason, in all the procedures, all the three, what we find is somebody is consuming the sneha in the conventional way of consuming any other foodstuff. So it looks like some sort of a havanam, sneham to the Agni inside. Aham Vaishwanaro Bhutva. So to that Vaishwanara, some sort of a havanam is going on. That is what we see. Anybody seeing it from the periphery, there is no difference. The way in which the sneha is consumed by the person, literally, For Shamana Sneha, Brahmana Sneha or Utkleshana Sneha is that they do not make any difference. So this is an assumption which is done by intelligent Vaidyas that for this particular purpose it should not be given the same way as it is done for the other two purposes. So it is a highly imaginative procedure. It's a highly imaginative procedure where the Vaidya has to put all his capacity to judge the entire process which is happening behind the screen. We are assuming. So it may be a bit difficult for the second and third strata of Shishyas among the three. The first strata of the Shishyas may be getting, or the Vaidyas, not a Shishya, sorry for that. The first category of Vaidyas may be doing this very easily, but the second and third strata may struggle a lot if you are going to explain this game which is happening in the case of Shodhananga Snehapana as such. So here, taking that two-third of the procedures are actual pachana and taking the fact that it may not be very easy to explain as such, addressing all the three strata of Vaidyas, we find that a common term is used, tal sugha paktaye. So we assume that it is pachanam. That is why previously also we saw some statement that when we were explaining the matra, we find dvabhyam chadurbhirashtabhir yamair jiryandi yakramad. So the word used is jiryandi, jiryandi, jaranam happening. But that is the case only with two-third of the cases. In one-third, it is not jaranam. But still, for the same reason what I was explaining so far, there also we find the word used is jaranam. Dvabhyam chadurbhirashtabhiryamair jiryandi yaha kramad hrasvamadhyottama matraha. So it is the Vaidya's choice whether to use this Ushna Vari Anupanam in the case of Shodhanartha Snehapana or not. In Shamana and Brahmana, it is logical. You can use it, but in the case of Utkleshana Snehapana, whether you need to drink Ushnodagam as Anupanam in Achapana of Sneha is a debatable point. Need not be always. In the other two situations, Jirna Jirna Vishangayam Punarushnodagam Pibed Tenodgara Vishuddhisyad Tatascha Lekhuta Rujihi. That is very important. In the case of Utkleshna Snehapana also, this Jirna Jirna Vishangayam Punarushnodagam Pibed. So there also is a question whether it is Jirna Jirna Vishanga. You told that there is no question of Jaranam, then why should we have Jirna Jirna Vishanga? It is not a Vishanga in that particular stage about whether the Sneha has gone through a stage of Jarana or not, but it is a question of assuring that whether the Agni has come back, fought back, and attains or occupies its basic seat in the Grahani so that the individual survives. Individual survives. This sort of a care we can find in fixing the dose while we saw that pragevatu hrasiyasim. Why pragevatu hrasiyasim? because the individual who is undergoing the treatment on a particular situation, in spite of the best assessment done by the best quality Vaidya, he is still having an untouched or unexplored koshtasthiti. Unexplored koshtasthiti. We do not know how that Agni is going to respond. That is why we find Ajnada Koshtehi Bahu Kudya Jivida Samsayam. In Ajnada Koshtha, if you go for Bahu Shuddhaye, that can cause Jivida Samsayam. There can be fatal outcomes out of it. Because in an aparijnata koshtha, you attack the Agni with a huge quantity of sneha, and you have no guarantee that the Agni will come back. Kuryat jivida samshayam. So these points are very, very important. Sneha can spread to the system through the Rasavahini Srotas, even if it is untouched by Agni. So that was the second part. The Sneha in this case works with Vyavai property. The Sneha is having Vyavai property, that is true. Even otherwise, I think it can spread across the Srotas and touch the dhatus because of the samanata called sneha or snigdhata. So that can spread across, but that will be left untouched by the dhattvagnis. That is very, very important. This is not about the case of sneha alone. Any stuff which is untouched and unmarked by the Jadharagni will be left untouched and unmarked by other principles or representations of Agni. Dhattvagnis are not supposed to touch them. And Dhattvagnis are the principles which make sure that the Dhadus get their share from the Rasadhatu or the so-called Ahara. So, as per the maybe the modern terminology, any parenteral route of administration, substances may not be considered as an ahara rasa or ahara sara, but it will be considered as something else, sometimes as visha, sometimes as an ama, and that will be marked by the body as a foreign substance. This is the case with amam also. Amam, amgamane, something which does not move, something which does not having the capacity of gamana is known as ama. That gamanam is not the literal meaning of literal act of moving from one seat to another, but it is the act of changing from the previous stage to the next stage which is it is supposed to change. So that is the way in which this sneha is doing the so-called ulkleshana karma. I think I have tried to explain or answer both the points which Vaidya Ashwin has asked. Is it clear now, Ashwin?
It is very much clear, sir. Sir, I
Okay.
have one in the Shamana Snehapana, the Agni, when it is strong and ready to digest, the
Yes.
Sneha, when it is taken, the Agni digests the Sneha and
Yes.
it overpowers the capacity of the Vivai property of the Sneha, and in spite of the Vivai property, it digests it and it.
No, no, no. It need not be so. You completed your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It need not be so. See, suppose that Sneha is getting into the system of to the
Mm.
Pajanasthana. In both the situations, we find that the individual is Chudwan. Individual is Chudwan. So there is no question of the Sneha getting left behind unattended by the Agni. Such a situation is not there. So there is no requirement of the Vyavai property being used at that point. If it is left unattended, then this Sneha can get into the system as such because of its Vivai property. But in Shamana Sneha properly done or a Brahmana Sneha properly done, there is no such a situation arising where the Sneha is left unattended by the Agni.
Yes, I
Is it
got it.
clear?
Yes, very much
Okay,
clear.
okay, okay. So with that questions and those questions answered, I think we will move forward with our today's Shastra Bhaga. That is just 1 minute. Yes. Bhojyonnam matraya pasyan shvah piban pidavanabi dravoshna manabhishyandi nadisnigdhamasankaram. Bhojyonnam matraya pasyan shvah piban pidavanabi द्रवोष्णमनभिष्यन्ति nadisnigdhamasankaram. So here we find actually that issue which we were discussing so far is there all throughout in this chapter. Even though the prime focus of this chapter was Shodhananga Snehapanam, because this is the context is Shodhana Chikitsa. Out of the three types of snehana, two are of one category which needs the Agnipasana, and the one is the Ulklesna Snehapana. Moving further forward, we will come to one point where we will be seeing the Samyak Lakshana and all those things of the Snehana. There, in all those situations, this issue is there. Whether that samyak sneha lakshana or samyak snigdha lakshana given is applicable equally for all those three types of snehana or not. That is a big point or big issue, which I think the text as such is not explaining, but the teacher has to explain. But the teacher has to explain. Otherwise, such areas will be creating more confusion in the learner than clarity. It is there all throughout this text, I mean this chapter. So now we find how we are proceeding with the uh, process of Snehapanam. Annam bhojyaha. In the Snehapana Kriya, Annam bhojyaha. The individual should take food, annam. How? Matraya. Matraya annam bhojyaha. What sort of annam? Dravoshna manabhishyandi nadisnigdham asankaram. Dravoshna manabhishyandi nadisnigdham asankaram. So the type of food to be consumed is very specific. Number one, we find matraya annam bhojyaha. Matraya. So there should be a sense of matra, quantity. Then regarding the quality, dravoshnam anabhishyandi. Dravam, ushnam, anabhishyandi. The aharam here being prescribed is or should be dravam, dravarupam, ushnam, anabhishyandi. Anabhishyandi means the other two terms are very clear. Abhishyandam is a state which is very close to the condition which we were looking for earlier. That means the sort of utklesham, but it is little bit different in its usage. Here the word is abhishyanti. Abhishyandam is a change that is happening to a principle which was sthira early, so that it becomes loose and loose and loose to such a level that in the next moment it may start flowing. That is what abhishyandi is. And when we come to the three doshas, this avastha of abhishyanda stands very close to the kobhavastha of kabha. It is very close to the kobhavastha of kabha. We have seen such explanations, isn't it? That chiyade snigdhashidabhirudagaushadhibhi kabha tulyepi kale dehe cha skannatvanna prakupyati. Skannatvanna prakupyati. So when that skannada is changing, as far as kabha is concerned, it changes its state to make it loose and loose and loose to a state where in the next moment it will start flowing. And that is known as an abhishyandavastha. It is known as an abhishyandavastha. And because of this similarity, generally abhishyandi is sometimes used as a visheshana for a dravya which has got the capacity to make sthira shleshma abhishyanda, to change the sthira shleshma to a state of abhishyanda. So that way abhishyandi means kabhakrit. In the Vyakhyanas you will find many a times abhishyandi means kabhakrit. This is the reason behind it. So here the word used is anabhishyandi, something which is having no capacity to work as a kabhakrit dravya, to bring kabhakopana. So it should be drava, it should be ushna. Dravam and ushnam generally makes the state loose. and ready to flow. That is why it is specifically mentioned that even though it is Drava and Ushna, it should not be Abhishyandi. So, Dravoshnam Anabhishyandi Annam Matraya Bhojyaha. Nadisnigdham. Nadisnigdham. It can be snigdham, but not adisnigdham. Because when it is adisnigdham, dravam and ushnam, it is very hard to make it anabhishyandi. So, nadisnigdham asankaram. Nadisnigdham asankaram. Asankaram means sankaram, a mixed up. Asankaram, not mixed up. That can be in terms of its guna, its virya, or its pathya, shilata. All these considerations can be there with the asankaram. Nadisnigdham asankaram. So, bhojyonnam matraya pasyan swah piban pidavanapi द्रवोष्णम अनभिष्यन्ति नादिस्निग्धम asankaram. Nadisnigdham asankaram. Who? That is the question next. What? We find annam. How? Then matraya. Then other properties. Dravoshnam anabhishyandi. Nadisnigdham asankaram. Then what else? We find a few more explanations. Swapasyan. Swapasyan. Somebody who is planning to consume the sneha or enter into a snehapana chikitsa from tomorrow onwards. Somebody who is planning to start snehapana from tomorrow onwards. Swapasyan piban. Piban. The day. That means it is running. That the day in which the snehapana is going on. Pidavan, somebody who has done with the snehapana. So somebody who is going to start the snehapana tomorrow onwards, somebody is through a course of snehapana, somebody who has done, just completed the snehapana. So initially, as a preparatory procedure to the initiation or the starting of snehapana, what should we do? Annam bhojyaha. What type of annam? Dravoshnam anabhishyandi nadisnigdham asankaram. How? Matraya. So, shvah pasyan matraya dravoshnam anabhishyandi nadisnigdham asankaram annam bhojyaha. Piban matraya द्रवोष्णम अनभिष्यन्ति नादिस्निग्धम असंकरम अन्नम मात्रया भोज्यः पीतवान् अपि द्रवोष्णम अनभिष्यन्ति नादिस्निग्धम असंकरम अन्नम मात्रया भोज्यः. This is a general rule. Again, whether this is applicable as such to all the three types, we should say that, okay, ideally this can be taken as a general rule for all types of snehapana, because this gives you fairly good idea about the type of food that one has to consume. But there can be issues. There can be, because when you go for a uttama snehapanam in terms of its matra, that covers अष्टाभिः यामैः द्वाभ्यां चतुर्भिरष्टाभिर्यामैर 8 into 3 equal to 24 hours. So practically somebody who consumes that Vimale Ravau, that Sneham on a fine day morning, in a sunny day morning, maybe some 8 o'clock, that matra is supposed to be finished by the next day morning 8 o'clock. Or if it is at 6 a.m., then next day 6 a.m. That is what is planned to happen. Whether it will happen or not is another question, but that is what it is supposed to happen. Then in 24 hours time, practically there is no time for this annam. So there are such special situations where this cannot be put into practice, but that never uh, denies the need for setting a standard for this ahara. So we find this ahara niyamam bhojyonnam matraya pasyan swapiban pidavanapi dravoshnam anabhishyandi nadisnigdham asankaram. Then further we find some other uh, points which are to be taken care of while somebody is with snehapana. What is that? उष्णोदगोपचारी स्याद् ब्रह्मचारी क्षपाशयः न वेगरोधी व्यायाम क्रोधशोकहिमातपान् प्रवादयानयानध्व भाष्यात्यासनसंस्थितिः नीचात्युच्चोपधानाः स्वप्न धूमरजांसि च यान्यहानि पिबेत्तानि तावन्त्यन्यान्यपि त्यजेत्. I will read it once again. उष्णोदकोपचारी स्याद् ब्रह्मचारी क्षपाशयः न वेगरोधी व्यायाम क्रोधशोकहिमातपान् प्रवादयानयानध्व भाष्यात्यासनसंस्थितिः नीचात्युच्चोपधानाः स्वप्न धूमरजांसि च यान्यहानि पिबेद तानि तावन्त्यन्यान्यपि त्यजेत्. Tyajed. Previously, in the previous shloka, we were seeing something which is to be bhajed, which is to be taken, which is to be consumed, which is to be followed. Now, we find something which is to be restricted, tyajed, a big list. I don't think that we will be able to finish that list one by one today. But anyway, I think we will find the words, at least the padam. Ushnodagopachari syad. That is not tyajed, that is also a bhajed, a part of the bhajed list. Ushnodagopachari syad. Ushnodagopachari. Ushnotaga upachari. Upacharam. All sorts of activities are coming under this upacharam. So for all activities where somebody requires water, do it with ushna jalam, ushnodagam, ushnodagopachari syad. Then brahmachari syad, brahmachari. Here brahmachari means abstinence, sexual abstinence. Brahmachari. Kshapashayaha. Kshapashayaha. Somebody who has slept well at night. Somebody who has slept well at night and not slept at through the day, not slept in the daytime. Kshapashayaha. So first line is again some sort of a advice to follow. And the second is the advice to limit or restrict certain things. In that list we find na vegarodhi, na vegarodhi. Then vyayama krodha shoga himatapan. Vyayama krodha shoga himatapan tyajed. Vyayamam krodham shogam himam atapam tyajed. Then pravada yana adhva bhashya atyasana samsthiti. Pravatam, direct wind, strong wind. Yanayanam, traveling on the type of vehicles which will create dehakshobham. Yanayanam, or any sort of vehicle, need not be something which is causing sort of dehakshobham. In any, don't travel in vehicles. Adhvam, adhvam is covering distances by walking. Adhvam. So do not walk. Bhashyam. Do not speak. Do not engage in long conversations or talks. Atyasanam. Continuous sitting. Samsthiti. Standing. Nija atyuchobadhanam. Don't use very thick or very shallow types of pillows while sleeping. Nija ubadhanam and atyucha ubadhanam. Ahaswapnam. No ahaswapnam. Dhumam. Dhumam. Smoke. Rajamsi. This dust. So these things tyajed. For how long? Yanyahani pibed tani. The days, all those days in which the individual is consuming the sneha or snehapana, tavanti anyani api tyajed. Tavanti anyani api. So an equal number of extended days. If the snehapana was for 5 days, okay, 5 more days. Tavanti anyanyapi tyajed. Tavanti anyanyapi tyajed. So, for an equal number of days extended, the person should follow all these advices strictly. So, I'll read it once again. Ushnodagopachari syad brahmachari kshapashayah na vegarodhi vyayama krodhashoga himatapan pravadayanayana bhashyaatyasana samsthiti नीचात्युच्चोपधानाः स्वप्नधूमरजांसि च यान्यहानि पिबेद् तानि तावन्त्यन्यान्यपि त्यजेत्. With that, I think we will conclude today's session. There is one more question, I think. In Utkleshna Snehapana, when Sneha given in Bahumatra, when Anna should be given? Yeah, that is the question. That is what I am saying. So these are the practical difficulties. So even though the Bahumatra is given as one sort of an ideal situation for making the Utklesana, you cannot do. We will come to that point later. I think that question will be answered in our future sessions. Relevance of Upadhana. Upadhanam, because these are all sort of the mithya cheshta, using very high upadhana or very low type of upadhana. Body should be having a proper shape, position, which provides it with a complete relaxed rest position, relaxed resting position. So upadhanam, I think in this particular situation, the person who is getting the sort of treatment is supposed to get admitted in a facility. So sometimes, as it is happening these days, the person may be getting admitted in a hospital, or the Vaidya may be going to the house of the person where there will be a dedicated room for this chikitsa where the person will be living. Obviously, this person will be spending most of the time on the bed. So obviously, I think the upadhana is going to be one of the consideration here. That's all. This in the next line we find that this is not going to be the case with snehapana alone. Sarvakarma swayam prayaha vyadhikshineshu chakramaha. We will come to that in the next session. So thank you very much for one more wonderful evening. Thank you very much. Shubharatri.
Yes. Thank you, Prasad sir, very much for again this wonderful session. And on behalf of all, Shubhratri. Thank you, sir.